welcome to the Recovery Daily Podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Abbasi. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic and stroke survivor. Today is day 17 of our plank challenge, and my sissy called to let me know that she is on board. And sorry, sissy, I'm going to tell everybody. So she decided to start like 2 days ago. So she went right in to 1 minute and 10 seconds. And anyway, she's right on board. So it's great. It makes me nervous that you started midway. So I'm just hoping you don't hurt yourself is all. You're not a young, a young chicken anymore. What is it? Anyway, yeah. Okay. Day 17. We've got, if you're on the 3-minute track, you're at 90 seconds. And if you're on the 5-minute track, you're at 120 seconds. So that's where we're at. Good luck with that. And today we're going to take a stroll down Sobriety Lane. And we're going to look back at how the promises have unfolded for me over the past 7 years. Now, the promises are, if you're not familiar with the program, they are outlined in our Alcoholics Anonymous book. The big book is what we call it. And they describe the benefits that AA members often experience as a result of working through the 12 steps. And these promises are considered by many in the recovery community to be both a source of hope and a goal, goals to strive for in sobriety. When I first got into the meetings, I saw the promises on the wall and I thought, there is no freaking way that stuff is going to come true for me. I really, and I imagine that I wasn't the only one who walked in there and thought that. But I realized today in my morning meeting, as we read a story out of the big book that referenced this, like, timeline of how things unfolded for the author of the story. I thought, the only thing that I was told is these things unfold sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but they will if we work at it. That's what I heard. But I didn't have an example, really, other than some of these stories in the big book, of how the promises, like how long it took them to unfold for people. So I thought, why don't I look at this? So I spent some time today and I just closed my eyes and went back through, like, when did I experience the promises? So I have jotted this down and we'll see if it makes sense or not. I think I have it jotted down so it makes sense. We'll see. We'll see. You will be the victim of this. Okay, so we're going to fast forward through my first detox time frame because I didn't follow the suggestions that were given to me, and so I drank again. So we're going to fast forward to detox number 2, and this happened in I went into detox on April 27th, 2016, and I was sober April 28th, 2016. So that's my sobriety date, the day after I entered into detox for the second time. So when I did this, I turned off my wanter. That's what I call it, my wanter. Meaning I would not allow myself anymore to make decisions for myself based on what I wanted because it wasn't working. And I realized that after the first time that I went to detox and didn't listen to any suggestions. So this time I turned off my wanter and I followed all suggestions. No matter what they told me to do, I would do it. And this is when I invited Rachel version 2.0 into my life. She was the one that was going to stop doing what Rachel 1.0 wanted to do. And now we were going to be a big girl, and we were going to follow all suggestions. So we entered in year 1 here. So year 1, the first 90 days, I just remember being absolutely exhausted and putting one foot in front of the other. I remember keeping my wanter off. I don't know where I got that drive. I guess I got that drive because I got to a point where I was willing to do whatever it took to get sober. And what it took was for me to stop recognizing whether I wanted to do something or not. It didn't matter whether I wanted to do it or not. I just had to get up and do it. And that was key for me. So during this first year, I learned how to say yes when I wanted to say no, to be of service. I learned that I had to get uncomfortable in order to get better. I had to be of service, meaning make coffee, volunteer to lead meetings or be secretary, and participate in outside activities, which were things like the summer picnic, or there were a bunch of ladies that we made cookies together for Christmas and that kind of thing. So I also learned how to practice meditation, and what that meant for me was reeling my thoughts back in like every second. Like meditation in the beginning was me sitting there with what felt like a hamster wheel spinning in my head, and I was constantly sticking my finger on it to stop it from spinning, like every second. So I went to a meditation meeting on Fridays at Club 12 in Leesburg. And I would sit there like every Friday and just like have that hamster wheel spinning for 10 minutes while we all sat in silence. And that's what it took for me to come back and just keep doing it over and over and over again. That's what practice looked like for me. I learned this first year how to not be embarrassed crying in front of people. I didn't really have a choice because every time I shared, I cried. And my voice would shake and my face would shake. Like I was just an absolute vulnerable mess. And coming to the rooms and showing that kind of vulnerability and having nobody judge me or make fun of me was like a significant experience for me. And that's how I learned that it's okay. All that stuff that's inside of me, the only way I was able to let it out is because the people in these meetings allowed me to. And it was okay. Like I knew it was okay. And it took beyond the first year for sure to have that stop happening. It took a few years actually for that to stop happening. I learned the first year that I'm not unique. I learned this when I was doing step 5 with my sponsor, and I sat down with her and told her all of these, secrets and deep thoughts and shame and guilt, and talked about all that stuff with her. And her response was, "Yeah, me too." And I was like, what? I'm not the only one in the world who's ever felt this way. I also learned how every group in the fellowship is a little different. We're all the same. We're all suffering from the same disease. But getting a group of alcoholics together, it's different, depending on the group. So I ended up, when I got a new job in Herndon, I started just going to all these different meetings from anywhere from, where I lived in Charlestown out to Herndon and everywhere in between. I stopped at all these different meetings and tried them out. And I just kept going until I found one that made me feel like I was at home, like made me feel like I was part of the family. And the place that kept drawing me back was Club 12 in Leesburg. So that is still where I call my home. And I also learned in the first year how to act as if, meaning I wasn't really comfortable with my outlook on God. I didn't like to say the word God. I was embarrassed. The whole concept of a higher power, like I was so wrapped up. I've talked about this just recently. I was so wrapped up in the idea of a higher power that I wasn't considering what the purpose was, what it was going to do for me. Instead, I was more wrapped up in what I was choosing as my higher power. And it kind of unfolded for me in interesting ways. And the first year, another thing that stood out for me is I ate a lot of candy. I ate a lot of candy. I actually had to detox off the candy after the first year, but that's okay because, for me, it was okay. I did whatever I had to do to not pick up a drink. And so I did eat a lot of Skittles during that time. So during the first year, I was thinking which promises came true for me in the first year. And I would say promise number 2, which says we're going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. That one came true for me because I knew that I was free from the obsession. It was the first time I had ever been free from the obsession. And I was able to find happiness in things other than the bottle. And I just honestly didn't know that was possible. I know that sounds weird to people who are not alcoholics, but I just didn't know it was possible to find joy outside of being drunk. And then I also think in year 1 that promise number 6 came true for me, and that was that the feeling of uselessness and self-pity would disappear. I no longer felt like I was worthless, like I had no, purpose in life other than, of course, to be a mother. And I, as much as I felt that strong purpose within me to be a mother, I wasn't able to do it because my obsession with alcohol was overriding anything else that was inside of me. So that disappeared the first year. I no longer had that like poor me, what's going to happen, like I'm destined to fail kind of thing. So enter year 2. Year 2 is where promise number 7 came true, and that is that we will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. I entered into year 2 with this. I was depressed a little bit. I celebrated my first anniversary. My sissy had a little party, and that was so nice. And then when I left the party, I thought, so I have to do this for the rest of my life? And that's dangerous. That was what got me drunk the first time I went to detox, when I got out and I was only sober for like 2 months, I thought to myself, there's no way I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And so I drank again. And so when I left my sister's house after my year 1 anniversary, I was driving home back to West Virginia, and I thought, oh, I'm going to have to do this for the rest of my life. And I felt it. I felt that same feeling that I might as well just drink. And I didn't. For some reason, I kept driving. There was a gas station where I would have stopped, that I considered stopping. And I just drove. I turned off my wanter is all I can say. I wanted to stop, and I just drove because I knew that that was the next right thing. And I have to say that next right thing idea, I didn't really mention that for year 1, but that got me through year 1. That was a part of the turning off my wanter and just doing the next right thing. If I didn't want to go to a meeting, I stood up, I turned off my wanter, and I said, what's the next right thing? And I stood up. And then what's the next right thing? I got to go get dressed. What's the next right thing? I got to pick up my keys. And that is truly some of those days, that's how it went. It was like minute by minute, what's the next right thing? So that has gotten me through a lot of close calls. And it did that day that I celebrated my first anniversary. And I'm glad it did, because it didn't happen after that. That was just a one-time thing. In year 2, I also kept practicing this meditation. I still was going to this Club 12. I was going to the Friday meditation meeting, and I just kept trying to sit there and clear my mind and think about my breathing, and get that hamster wheel to stop moving, to stop spinning. I kept suiting up and showing up to meetings, to work, to my therapist. I went to an addiction therapist for 2 years, so I kept going to her. And that's really, it felt like the first into the, I guess, through the end, and then through the second end of the first year and through the second year, I felt like there was a lot of just suiting up and showing up happening. The next right thing. Just kind of going through the motions. It wasn't like I was a robot. It wasn't like I didn't have enjoyment in my life. But it became, I think what was happening is I was building a habit of doing the next right thing. I was getting really comfortable turning off my wanter and doing what I'm supposed to do. It's almost like I was learning how to adult, and I hadn't learned how to do that yet, because I think I've mentioned it before. They say that when you start drinking, you stop growing. And it was like I stopped growing in high school, and I had to learn how to be an adult. And so I did a lot of suiting up and showing up. I started looking a lot healthier. I think I had to get my license redone during the second year. And the difference between my 2 licenses was so astounding that I was showing everybody. I was like, look how amazing I am. But I was proud, my confidence grew, and my feeling that I deserved happiness grew. My anxiety began to not be so scary. I guess my medication was working for sure. My medication started working because I wasn't drinking anymore. But I also was tackling those things by working the steps. I was tackling those things that were hidden, in my dark place. And by tackling them, the anxiety was also shrinking, the regrets, the shame, the guilt, that was shrinking. The anxiety that is correlated to my chemical imbalance in my body that I need medication for, that's still there. And it's still there today. But it's manageable. It's manageable the way that it should be. It just wasn't. I couldn't manage it when I was drinking. And I continued with the steps. It took me over a year to do all the steps. I was not rushing. I think I stalled out at step 4, where a lot of people stall out, because I just didn't want to write my stuff on paper. And the same thing happened at step 8. I didn't want to write this stuff on paper. But I could see through being consistent that things were beginning to change. I remember in year 2 being able to see that my financial situation was slowly, ever so slowly improving. It still seemed like it was overwhelming, but it was the first time in my life that my financial situation was getting better, that I was actually paying things off for the first time in my life. And my ability to focus on things mentally improved enormously. I got so much more able to think through large concepts at work. I started to be able to put together large strategies and write large documents. Like, I could really start being able to put together the whole picture of things that I was working on at work, if that makes sense. But this lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows, I started to really connect with people. I had finally found some meetings that I felt like I was starting to grow like this family of brothers and sisters. And even there was like a guy that reminded me of like a grandfather figure kind of thing. So there was like, it's like I was building a network that felt like, a second family to me. And I started really caring for these people. I stopped wanting to serve myself as much as I wanted to take care of other people, including, my kids and my family, my real family. So that was year 2, and then year 3 and 4. This was a critical time when a lot of the promises really started coming true for me. In years 3 and 4, I got to the point where I was asked to do a 12-step series at Club 12. So every 12 weeks, a new person would guide the 12-step meeting and do a step a week for 12 weeks. So I was asked to do this, and I remember being super freaked out, and I totally cried, like messy, ugly cried for step 1. And I still feel a little embarrassed about that, but I know I shouldn't be. It was just really, I was terribly passionate that day. Anyway, and then I began to see my experience as an alcoholic as something that could lend hope to others, not only in the program, but outside of the program. I started to feel more comfortable sharing with other people that I was in recovery, and it became a thing for me to share with my team at work. Whenever I would get a new employee on my team or whatever, I would share with them that I was a recovering alcoholic. And then whenever we'd get a new staff member in, like director in HR, I would share with them also that I was a recovering alcoholic. And it was because I wanted to be a resource for others. I wasn't telling people because I wanted to talk about myself. I was telling people because I realized that I had been through the depths of what the disease can do to you. Um, and I realized that the only way that I got sober was because I told somebody at work who knew what to do, who became a resource for me. And that's why I really believe that that's why I was able to get sober and have the support of my company. So I began to deeply care for the well-being of those in the fellowship as time and time again, individuals lost their lives. People that I was sitting next to, people that I was friends with, they were losing their lives to the disease. And I became truly passionate about us as a community. It was no longer just me. It became us. You know, that family feeling that I started to feel in year 2, that was just getting stronger and stronger, and the family was getting bigger and bigger in my heart. In year 3 and 4, I say 3 and 4 because I don't know which was which, but that in that time frame, I began to get on my knees to pray beside my bed. And this was because I had heard people talking about it in the meetings all the time. And I thought, I don't know, that seems a little embarrassing or whatever. And and it just made me feel awkward to hear people say, and I just get on my knees, you know, and I'm like, what if somebody walks in and I'm on my knees beside my bed? And then I got to the point where I'm like, if this makes my relationship with my higher power or my resolve to stay sober, if this makes it more intense or stronger, then I'll just try it. I mean, what's it going to hurt? Everything I've done so far, I just tried it because they were suggestions. Nobody suggested that I get on my knees, but I thought, I don't know, it's working for other people. Let me try it. So the first time I did it, I shut my door to my room. My dog was in there, but I shut my door to my room and I turned out the light and I was like, okay, nobody can see me. And I said my little prayer. It was just like, I'm grateful for, or thank you for my sobriety. I think that's what it is. And then, so I started doing this every night before I went to bed. And then after like a week, I'm like, all right, I don't need to shut the door. Nobody's coming in here. And I kept doing it. And then I would say it's been a couple years since I have felt like I wouldn't be embarrassed if like my daughter or my son came in the room and I was on my knees beside my bed praying. So I don't feel embarrassed about it anymore. But it's taken a while for me to be like, what if somebody walks in? Which is silly, it's silly, but that's just me, that's me, and I'm being honest. That's what I do here. Talk about how silly I am. So that was what I started in year 3 and 4. And let me tell you, it has actually become such a like humbling experience to like get down on my knees beside my bed, and I kind of cross my, hold my hands together, and then I put my head down on my fists and I say my prayer. So I'm kind of like totally folded over. And the first thing that I do is I think of my children's faces. That's my favorite thing to do first, because I don't know, because it just fills me with so much love and happiness when I think of them and I picture their faces. So that's the first thing I do when I get down on my knees to pray. And then I pray. And I just feel like no matter how bad my day has been, no matter how stressed out I am or whatever's happening in my life, pre-stroke, post-stroke, when I get down on my knees beside my bed and I put my head down on my fists, it's like there's nothing wrong. It's like I'm home. It's like I'm in my little protected cocoon and nothing can hurt me. That's what I feel like at that moment in time every night when I do it. And it's become something that I just love so much because it makes me feel so comforted when I do it. So I do it all the time. So that's quite a difference to go from I don't want anybody to see me doing it to this is my favorite thing to do and now I don't care necessarily who sees it. I just want to make sure it happens because I love it, that kind of thing. So enough about that. And then in years 3 and 4, I acquired 2 sponsees. I also was running 5Ks. I started hot yoga. So this is when my physical well-being started to really flourish. Like, I guess nutritionally, I was getting what I needed. So my body was feeling strong enough to start using it more. So I was running, I was doing hot yoga, and this is during this time that I remember walking outside and having the moment of clarity where I realized that I know serenity. And this is one of the promises. So this is promise number 4. We will comprehend the word serenity and we will know peace. So that happened in years 3 and 4. And I started to become a leader at work. So it wasn't just my body that was getting stronger. My mind was getting stronger and my brain was functioning better. I could think more clearly. It's the only way that I can explain it. I saw beauty in things that I never saw before, ever, ever. I remember driving into work and passing things like, like I don't know, not a groundhog, but maybe a groundhog on the side of the road, alive. And it was just like sitting there, kind of looking at the cars going by, and I smile. Or I see a squirrel and I smile. Or I see a child like playing in the front yard, like in the morning on the way to work, and I smile at the beauty of that. It's just, I had a whole different lens I was looking through. So that started in 3 and 4. And then I also switched sponsors during this time for no reason other than I was going to be moving. And so the promises that came true during this time were, number 1, if we're painstaking about this phase of our development, then we will be amazed before we were halfway through. So I'm at year 7. I'm rounding the corner of year 7. And I would say at year 3, I was amazed. And so that was halfway, before we were halfway through. I mean, that's halfway through the steps, I think they mean. But really, I think amazement, the longer I'm sober, the more amazed I become. So amazement just started around then, and I continue to be more and more amazed. And then promise number 3, we will not regret the past nor wish to shut the door on it. This took a few years for me, for sure. And I think there are still just a couple events in my life that I'm still challenged, not regretting, but I definitely understand not wishing to shut the door on it. Most things I don't regret anymore. There's just I think two that I have a hard time finding how I can not regret that. So, still work in progress, and that's okay. And promise number 5, which is no matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. And again, that's what I started to feel, as I said, in years 3 and 4, I began to see my experience as something that could lend hope to others, and I began to deeply care for the well-being of those in the fellowship. And then promise number 8, self-seeking will slip away. And that, again, same thing. I was starting to care so much about the people that I was in sobriety with. It was like, it's a we program. I get that. I got that during that time. I was starting to understand that this isn't about me. This is about all of us. We're all in the boat, and if anybody falls out, we reach over and help them back in. So year number 5, this is when I moved from Charlestown out here to the Sterling area. And I began to feel even more like I had something to give. Now, this is before my stroke. I was feeling very much at work like my program, people didn't know it, but I was working my program on them all the time, because it's a program for how to live. And it really was doing such a good job guiding me that I would use it to help guide others. And it was working, it seemed to be working. People were coming to me and asking, like, how would you handle this situation? And it still happens today, but I really feel like in year 5, I really started to get folks coming to me, and I felt very strongly that I had something to give that could be helpful to others, both in sobriety, as a people leader at work, as a sister and a daughter and a mom and a girlfriend. Like, I felt like I was participating in my relationships and being helpful. I was very active during this time. Year 5 was probably the most active I have ever been in my life. I was hiking with my dog, Autumn, my Weimaraner. I was doing yoga, and this is right when COVID was kicking off as well. I guess it had already kicked off. So I was doing yoga every day. I was running, and I was kayaking, and you name it. I was so active all the time. And then I had my stroke. So I think it's kind of cool. It didn't hit me until just this moment how before I had my stroke, it was the most active I've ever been in my life, that I was really at a really good place. That seems like up until this moment, that has seemed to me like oh, poor Rachel, you were so active and now you can't do any of those things. But at this very moment, when I think about it, it seems like I was gifted with the ability to do all of those things before I had my stroke. So I'm kind of looking at it a little differently just right this second. I don't know why, but that's a good thing. and I had my stroke. So then I was struggling with pain management because, as you know, I've had a headache every day since my stroke in June of 2021. So I really started thinking about muscle relaxers. This pain in my head feels like the muscles in my head are tightening like a rubber band around my head. So muscle relaxers is the thing that my mind goes to and or has gone to. And my response to this has been leaning into work and leaning into my sobriety program. That's what I did from year 5 to 7 while I was in denial from my stroke. Like while I was in denial, being like, oh, there's no way I have to like stop working or go on long-term disability. Like it's just a headache. It'll go away. Until things got worse and my vision got worse and all my symptoms got worse. My cognitive language and speech started getting worse. But during this time, I still had promises coming true, believe it or not. So I have promise number 9, my whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. So that was right before my stroke. And honestly, it continues to change as I've had this life-altering event of my stroke happen. But before my stroke, I really was looking at life like I was looking at my body as a gift that I was given that was allowing me to do all of those fun things. Doing yoga, going hiking, going biking, going kayaking. Like I felt for the first time in my life that I was given this body that is like a gift, that's like my playground that I get to go use and go be active and enjoy the world and stuff. I was thinking that before my stroke. And I remember thinking that all the time. I remember thinking that. I started thinking that when I started hot yoga. Hot yoga was an introduction to me on how incredible our bodies are. And it was the first time I had ever profusely sweated, which actually felt amazing. But with that, I started doing all these other running. Running was an amazing experience for me that my body was able to do that because I had never done it before. I was always drinking, so I hardly ever moved my body. So my whole attitude and outlook on life changed for sure during this time. Promise number 10, fear of people and economic insecurity will leave us. That was year 5 for me. Year 5 was when I finally was financially back. Like I had paid off all of my debt, and I never imagined my whole life that I was going to be able to pay off all my debt. And I did by year 5. So that was incredible for me. And I no longer, because of that, was fearing institutions, who were calling me and trying to get their money or anything like that. So just an incredible relief to experience that. And then promise number 11, we will intuitively know how to handle situations that used to baffle us. And I think this goes hand in hand with that ability to start feeling like I had something to give to others. I started just intuitively knowing how to handle things because I stopped fighting what was happening. I started recognizing that during this time that I can't control people, places, and things. I can't control what's happening around me. All I can do is control my reaction to it. And this was, for me, the translation of this promise We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. Really, for me, it was just get out of your own way. Stop trying to inject yourself in everything. Stop trying to think that you can fix everything. Like, for me, it was, okay, do I insert myself here or do I not? Is this my problem or is this somebody else's problem? It was kind of my ability to stand back and look at things in a simpler way. I didn't get all spun up about things anymore, and I continue to have that ability. My husband is a huge help in, if I get to a point where I'm like, I'm not really feeling like I'm processing this very well. Sitting with him and talking it through is like an incredible gift that I have. So anyway, yeah, I mean, step 11 for sure it absolutely has come true for me. And then that brings us to years 6 and 7. And years 6 and 7, this is where I believe and this is honestly just the past couple months that I have felt like step 12, or not step 12, promise number 12 has started to become true for me. So promise number 12 says, we will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. And I've just had some really strange experiences lately, and it's almost undeniable. It's not even, I don't want to share necessarily, but it's like everything I'm doing right now is like going back to this whole God thing. Everything I do, it's like I can't even avoid it. It's just constant. The God this, God that. God, I mean, no matter who I talk to, it's there. And it's like, how like the past month I've been having a difficult time. And I started going to the psychiatrist and everything. And it's like all of a sudden, the psychiatrist isn't talking about God, but it's like all of a sudden, everywhere I go or anything I listen to is like God this, God that. And I don't know, it's making me feel better. And I guess it's making me think a little more, which is not a bad thing, I don't know. I'm experiencing a lot of strange stuff lately. We'll just leave it at that. So in the past 2 years, years 6 and 7, I was in denial, but I kept applying my sobriety program. And I did it the best I knew how for the denial that I was in. I got to the point, however, that I recognized that my life was unmanageable again, the same way that I did 7 years ago when I decided I needed to get sober. Same thing. I realized that I can't go on like this. And that's what happened again. And so this is when I invited Rachel version 3.0. And that's who we're talking to today. Rachel 3.0. And now I continue to really, I struggle with, am I reinventing myself? I don't know, because I just, 2 episodes ago, I was just talking about my core has not changed, but I am rebuilding around it. I'm rebuilding that sandcastle that I've talked about since the beginning of this podcast. And by doing things like sewing, baking, and I'm continuing to, I think where I'm starting to find the most enjoyment is continuing to try to grow a network in the blind and low vision community and stroke community. And then, of course, my beloved sobriety community. But I'm starting to feel connected a little more. And I feel like there's something there. I need to keep going in that direction. I need to keep building in that area, especially, yeah. I was going to say especially in the blind and low vision, but I wouldn't say especially. It's in all three, really. In stroke recovery, blind and low vision, community, and sobriety. All of these things are really, they're helping. I am working hard every day to try to figure all this out. And hopefully, by me working hard and figuring it out and then sharing my experience, that others will not have to work so hard to figure it out. So just like that, our time together is wrapping up today. Walking through the past 7 years has brought back a lot of memories, and it's good for me to remember what it was like and why I'm here. And it's always good to strengthen my resolve to keep going on the path that I'm on, to keep staying away from a drink, keep working hard at recovery. And maybe you found a bit of your story in mine, seeing those promises unfolding in different ways. I like to think back at those times because sometimes it's just abundantly clear to me that I have achieved another promise. And so I enjoy it. The promises are kind of a fun thing to go back and look at. So I recommend um, going back and doing a little timeline. It really wasn't much effort to do a little timeline for myself and see, when did this happen? And maybe by doing that, you might be able to help somebody else who's thinking, oh, I can't imagine not regretting the past nor wishing to shut the door on it. Well, you can tell them when it happened for you, and that might be helpful for them. So thank you for joining me today on the Recovery Daily podcast, and I will talk to you tomorrow.